Episode 15, the co-founder of Honest Tea, Seth Goldman. Welcome to The Art of Excellence, a show about people doing extraordinary things in their lives. I'm your host, Glenn Zweig. Thanks for joining me. My guest today is Seth Goldman. Seth is the co-founder of Honest Tea, a company he started in 1998 and has grown to over $100 million in revenue. Today, Honest Tea is the nation's top-selling, ready-to-drink organic bottled tea. The Honest Tea brands are available in over 100,000 outlets across the United States. The company was acquired by Coca Cola in 2011. Seth, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Glenn. Great to be with you. And I'll just give you a few updates where our brand is now over 200 million in sales, and we're in over 130,000 outlets around the country.
Wow. Very impressive. I want to go back, though, and sort of start from the beginning. Did you grow up knowing one day you were going to be an entrepreneur, or did this bug get planted later in life for you?
You know, I always did have an entrepreneurial bug. I used to sell golf balls. I lived not too far from a golf course, and so I would find golf balls in the bushes and sell those to the golfers along with lemonade. And I was always starting up organizations in high school and in college and then in business school. So I guess you could say I did always have an entrepreneurial inkling. Perhaps the surprise for me, at least, is that it's been in the for-profit arena. I think I thought of myself as someone who would create things maybe more in the public sphere, whether it was in government or in nonprofit. And so that's a little bit of unexpected for me.
Well, you were working for a mutual fund company prior to starting Honest Tea. What did you do there?
So it was not your typical mutual fund company. It was the Calvert group, and they specialized in socially and environmentally responsible investing. So they would have screens, for example, they wouldn't invest in tobacco companies or companies with bad environmental records. And then they also had an element of the business where they would go seek out innovators and try to invest in those companies. And I was involved in both the marketing and sales of those funds, as well as some of that networking and investment opportunity work with the entrepreneurs. And that's clearly what excited me about that whole business.
So the notion of double bottom line, socially responsible types of businesses is what appealed to you, as opposed to you wanted to be a finance guy and here's a mutual fund company, and that was the particular angle you took of it. For
sure, yeah. I was very much inspired by the idea of businesses with public mission commitments embodied and embedded in the business.
Were you happy in the role, or was there something missing for you?
Yeah, it was a good company, great workplace, something that was aligned. I got up every day feeling like I was doing work I believed in. There was nothing wrong with Calvert. For me, what happened was I got an idea that I got excited about in a way that I couldn't sleep, and was absolutely tapped into a lot of the different passions I had around health, around environment, around thinking how we can change the working conditions in the developing world. All of those things excited me. And then the fact that I had been a runner in college, so I'd always been thirsty, and I'd always looked for something that could quench my thirst without tons of calories. And so this was a personal passion too. And when you put all of those together, the Calvert business didn't stand a chance. And it wasn't at all a knock on Calvert. It was that I had identified a way to connect all those things I was passionate about. And so, there was not even a conflict about what was the right decision for me.
My understanding is you originally conceived the idea in business school. Is that right?
Yeah, I came across this idea. I was at the Yale School of Management, and my professor, Barry Nailbuff, was teaching the case study of the Cola Wars, and we both converged around this idea of the less sweet drink. And at the time, he had said, let's make some samples, let's do some focus groups. And I, being a second year business school student, knew I had to find a job. And it wasn't until several years after graduating from Yale that I reached back out to Barry, and he became my co-founder around this idea.
But looking back, why not just start it out of business school? I mean, it's not like mutual funds are going to teach you about a beverage company, right?
Here's a few things. Look, maybe it could have happened. Maybe it could have worked. But first of all, I hadn't really worked in the private sector before. So there were two constraints. One was I didn't really have any financial cushion. So I would have, I also didn't have the experience and confidence of the business world. And maybe I could have finessed that and gotten around it. And I also had, felt a responsibility to my family. My wife, had agreed to make the move up to New Haven, and she had a career. And so we were, she felt a personal desire to come back to the DC area where her family was based. And so there were just a lot of different elements that made it not the right time. And frankly, even when we launched in 1998, we were so far ahead of our time back then with Honest Tea that being 2 years earlier might almost been a deal breaker. I mean, by that I mean consumers' palates were not where they are today. So when we were selling these drinks at 17 calories per 8 ounces, it was very far from where consumers were willing to try. And, by 1998, maybe they were a little bit closer. Obviously today, what we offer is very much in the mainstream of people's palates tastes, but that was just not the case 10 years ago or 12 years ago. So I'm comfortable saying that it was fine for me not to launch this business right out of business school.
How much time did you spend analyzing the market and the opportunity and putting together a business plan before you finally called it quits with the mutual fund company?
Not that much time, to be honest. What we knew was that intrinsically we felt this kind of drink was missing from the market. We were thirsty for a drink like this. And that was more than anything what guided us. Once we decided to launch the business, we did do a few focus groups just to hear how people responded to it, what was on their minds, all of which basically, I think confirmed we had the right assumption. But, you could do all that work. In fact, one of my contentions is the reason companies like Coca Cola missed this idea of a less sweet drink opportunity is because they did so much market research, and the market research can miss these kind of things. So, I would say we did just the right amount of thinking about it, which is not too much.
I mean, as you know, you can research forever in a day. You never have all the answers.
Right. And you still might miss the opportunity.
And you still might miss. So eventually, at some point, you got to just say enough is enough and take the plunge. So do you remember that moment when you said enough researching, enough planning, I'm just going to do it?
Yeah. So I know the exact moment where I recognized the idea was worth pursuing. I had been in New York City on behalf of Calvert. I had given a presentation to some institutional investors, and I went for a run in Central Park. And after the run, I was thirsty, and I go to one of these, shops where there's tons of drinks, and I realized all these drinks, and yet none of them has that calorie profile I'm looking for. And I knew I was ready to do something about it. So then I reached out to Barry, and he agreed, and he had come up with the name Honest Tea, and we thought about the idea a little more. And then I eventually went to the president of Calvert, and I told her I was going to be leaving this, wonderful company with a wonderful rising position to go launch a beverage company. And she was a little flabbergasted, like, wait, what? But I knew, what I didn't know at the time, was, A, that we could make the product. We hadn't made it at anywhere but my kitchen. And B, I had no appreciation for the challenge of distribution and what it would take to scale the business. And I certainly learned that.
Wait, hang on. Let me just pause there for a minute. Like you said, you had no background in the beverage market. You had no background in consumer packaged goods other than doing some case studies in business school. So how do you figure out what to do? I mean, how do you even start? Do you read books? You get mentors? You hire consultants?
A lot of it you just learn by doing. I mean, obviously Barry was a great mentor and partner. Not that he had any prior experience, but I did reach out to a lot of people who had experience, and I read books, and I went to, there was a talk given by the Toms of the Nantucket Nectars, and I got to hear them speak about their experience. And I met one guy who had a beer company, and he told me about a bottle supplier he worked with. So I went and met with that bottle supplier. And then, the bottle supplier told me about some of the label suppliers who he has connected with. And all of these things are discoverable. There's no magic formula, no secret code. It was just a matter of continuing to talk to people and It's certainly easy to look at it as a whole and feel it's imposing and impossible. But when you break it down, whether it's finding a juice supplier or a tea supplier or a bottle cap supplier, these are all doable.
But you didn't feel the need, as some people do, to have done all that research ahead of time. You sort of just said, I'm going to dive into it and I'll learn as I go.
Absolutely. And that's what happened.
So walk us through the playbook of starting up a beverage company.
Well, first of all, I should say I have written, my co-founder and I did write a book called Mission in a Bottle, which is the story of building Honest Tea. And it's a fun, actually, comic book we wrote, and a comic in the sense that it's visually illustrated. Unfortunately, not all of it is funny. Some of it is sad. What we did was the main thing we had right was this idea of the brand we wanted to create. And so we kind of wrote a business plan that is available on Honest Tea's website at honesttea.com. And that business plan lays out a vision of a brand that we wanted to build. And I would say that vision is very much what is alive today as the Honest brand, a brand that, has this commitment to honesty and transparency and social responsibility. So we had that vision, and then starting with that vision, we worked backwards. We said, okay, well, what does a brand like that look like from a packaging perspective? And we designed a package that was very minimalist from a design perspective, that had a lot of open space so consumers could see what's inside the bottle. And then we thought about the recipe. What would that recipe taste like? And of course, for us, the key thing, if we called it Honest Tea, was that it would be brewed with real tea leaves and that would have less sweetener. And then we thought about, well, what does that sourcing look like? Well, we knew at the time we wanted to have close partnerships with our suppliers. We didn't at that time know that would take the form of fair trade, but we left that, we designed it in a way that would be a natural evolution to find some kind of official way to certify that we were working closely with these communities in a way that invested back into them. And then we thought about, well, what does the marketing of something like look like? Well, it's not the typical, big billboard advertising. It's going to be much more focused on person-to-person interactions, whether it's a sampling in a store or at a cultural event. And so when you start with that big picture vision, a lot of the other pieces just kind of fall into place.
In terms of the target market, was the thinking that you're going to convert existing bottled tea drinkers, which I think at the time was mostly controlled by Snapple,
yeah,
or were you more trying to go after an entirely new market? They weren't even drinking bottled tea yet.
That's right. Well, we realized, because we started doing these samplings, and we'd have people walk by who said, I don't drink bottled tea. They're all too sweet. And we say, this is a product made for you. So it was largely people who were not in the category. And while that was good for building consumers, we knew clearly what it was. Our challenge was that in order to get distributors on board, the distributors were the folks distributing these very sweet teas, and they would taste our product and they'd say, that's not sweet enough. Because we knew who our target was, we had this challenge of how do we get to them? And in a way, the distributors almost became our barrier to getting to them.
So you have no marketing budget, as you pointed out.
Right.
There's no radio, there's no TV, there's probably no newspapers and magazines. So it was all just trying to find a way to get local shelf space and then having some boots on the ground, handing out samples?
Well, the good advantage of having such limited distribution was we knew there were only a limited number of places where people were going to buy our product. So we also knew there was only a limited number of places that made sense to give out samples. There was no point in, advertising if people could only find our product at Whole Foods, and there was no point in giving out samples at a metro stop if the only place they could buy it was Whole Foods. And so if we were only in Whole Foods stores, then we were only going to give out samples in Whole Foods stores. And so that focus was actually a real gift, and that's what we did. We just did sampling in the stores where we were carried.
Well, a lot of entrepreneurs in the food and beverage space get all excited when they're able to sell into the channel. But these days, you can buy your way into the channel. It's the sell-through where the rubber hits the road. And so somehow you were able to do enough sampling and get enough buzz that I assume the numbers were good and you were able to just keep growing from there.
Well, we knew that first summer we got into 17 Whole Foods stores, and we knew if we didn't succeed in those stores, there was nothing to grow from. So all we cared about was making sure we sold through in those stores. And we gave out more samples that first summer than we sold, but we ended up becoming the best-selling tea in those stores, and that was our launch pad.
When you started the business, what exactly was the goal? Would you have been content with just a small but profitable cash flowing lifestyle business? Or were you always driven to build something big and sell it eventually?
We were always driven to build something big. We weren't driven to sell it eventually. We were driven to create a brand that really represented a different approach to business, certainly to beverages, to health. And so that was the vision we had hoped to create. And I think that's largely what has come to pass.
So in those early years when you're getting the company off the ground, what was the biggest mistake you'd say you made? Is there one that stands out?
Our biggest challenge was distribution. So that was one we just continued to work out, and we managed to get a diverse network of distributors up and running. But the biggest mistake we made was that we had not figured out how to produce our product at scale. We initially went to an apple juice packing plant, and they would give us time to produce on their lines. But then it came apple season, and we realized, look, all they care about is apple juice. They're not going to give us production line time, and if we don't have that, we're going to go out of business. So we ended up becoming a part owner in a bottling plant. We owned a third of it, and it was just a huge sinkhole. We put lots of money into it. It was very distracting, and it wasn't building our brand. It was distracting us from building the brand. And so had we really thought about what we were building, we would have known, and we weren't even building a tea brand. We were building the Honest brand. And if we had understood that was a point of value, we would have put more focus on building the brand rather than trying to build the overall part of the business.
And how did you finance all of this early on?
We had angel investors who would come in and put money into the business, and they were wonderfully supportive. We were extremely fortunate to have their support.
Were these angels friends and family, or were they people that cared about the social mission, or were these beverage entrepreneurs?
The first round of financing, we raised $500,000. That was just from friends and family. That was, my money, my parents, Barry, his parents, my sister, some of Barry's college roommates and friends. But then after that, the next wave of money came from people who liked to drink, who thought we were onto something, who said, this is a creative idea that is different from what's out there, and we think there's potential for this. And that was basically where we raised our money over the next 9 years. Those friends and then those people and their friends all came in, and that was basically how we funded the losses which we had over those years.
So you never had to go after venture capital?
We were approached by venture capital investors, but we did not take that kind of money because they were looking for terms that were too onerous, too demanding, and we would have lost control of the business.
So there have got to be hundreds, if not thousands, of beverage startups every year.
Yeah.
Most of them go under. You didn't. You're obviously a smart guy. You had a good plan, a good idea, a good vision, a good brand. But, you could make that case with, 1,000 others out there, and you get acquired by Coca Cola and have built a huge behemoth in this industry, 200 million plus in revenues, and all these others have gone under. Why do you think you, Seth, were able to succeed?
A few things. I think, first of all, we had a very clear and differentiated proposition. What we were offering was unlike anything else on the shelf. We weren't just another, sweet bottle tea. We were so clearly different in our calorie profile. No one would confuse us with any of the offerings. So that was an important point. Then when we built that into something meaningful, it became valuable because, look, Coca-Cola or Pepsi or any of these companies can make a sweet tea. They already did. It was both making and formulating and then branding and building loyalty around a less sweet drink that was really worthwhile. That said, we were very close to being out of business numerous times, and really what kept us in business was both having loyal supporters and investors, and also a great deal of passion and discipline within our business. So we weren't spending our money recklessly. We were making, $2 out of every $1 we had. And there was sacrifice along the way. There were certainly lean times. We weren't particularly well paid, or certainly not living in comfortable offices or anything like that. But that helped us sort of make it through the lean years.
When you had these lean years and you said you almost went under several times, were you always optimistic that somehow things were going to work out? Or were there times where you said, you know what? Oh, well, I gave it my all. This is the end of the road. And then you're already thinking about the next thing.
I was never thinking about throwing in the towel, but that, part of that's me. I'm just, as my wife says, a relentless optimist, and probably in a way that isn't necessarily always useful. But I, believe so strongly in what we're doing and just refuse to accept that this wasn't going to work, even when sometimes the business reality suggested otherwise.
So a few years before Coca-Cola purchased you, they took a 40% stake. I think it was back in 2008.
Correct.
What was behind the investment, both for you and Coke? Was it more about getting liquidity, or was it about harnessing the distribution and marketing reach of Coke?
Well, for us, we had come to a point where we were growing, but we hit this crossroads where we were the best-selling team in the natural foods channel, but we were having challenges crossing over into mainstream channels because stores like Safeway and CVS wanted our product, but we didn't have the ability to distribute to them. So we said, look, we're either going to become a large national brand with a reach, or we're going to stay in our niche. And we knew we wanted to become that large national brand. From Coke's perspective, they looked at all the big trends out there, and they said they really identified 3 big mega trends that were happening. One was a movement towards health and wellness. One was a movement with environmental responsibility. And one was a movement with corporate social responsibility. And said, the Honest brand is at the intersection of all 3 of those. And if we could invest in that company, we'd be able to really embrace this new standard for doing business. And it would be something that would be forward thinking for the company as well as a good business opportunity.
Looking back, you really caught a wave on 2 fronts. First, you had the growing bottled tea market. But the second, and you've already touched upon this, was this trend toward natural and organic. Consumers demanding more natural ingredients, more transparency from products, more authenticity from brands, and a greater social mission. You could argue that maybe Whole Foods started that trend, but you really caught it early on at the inflection point. So I know these are personal values of yours, but beyond that, were you just a visionary that you saw this is where this whole industry was going? Or were you just saying, let me just create a better tasting product with values that I personally care about, and hopefully that'll be enough to win the day?
Well, there certainly started out of a personal thirst, literally, where I felt like, gosh, if I can't be the only person who feels like all these drinks are not sweet enough. I also believe that if we could put the whole sense of these values into our business, then we'd be able to build something that we could be excited about all the time, not just feel like, this is an exciting way to make money or to move cases around. This was really about trying to put something different out there. This was always about, kind of a expression of values for me.
So let's talk about branding for a minute. You start this company in the 90s. How has brand building changed with the advent of social media? Is it harder? Is it easier?
Any piece of branding work, you always have to have a clear and different point of view. And so that's at the core of what we're doing. Then the only other question is, well, how do you connect people to it? So in the beginning, it was much more hand to hand. It was sampling and in-store events. Now with social media, we can reach people through the ether. And when you find something that resonates, they start to spread it and share it. So the spreading is different. The work that happens beyond our own efforts, that's for us exciting. But back in the day, it was people, if they tasted it in a store, would tell their friends, "Oh, you got to try this Honest tea. It's so different." It's still, when you boil it down, it's still the same type of work. It's just different channels how you reach people.
So 13 years in the making, you finally sell to Coke. What was that day like for you? The moment you inked that purchase and sale agreement, how did it feel?
The bigger moment was really in 2008 when we took in Coke as an investor, because in a sense we were already putting ourselves on a path toward that sale. And so I was so enmeshed in the business, and I'm still so enmeshed in the business, that it doesn't feel like it was different. It wasn't like all of a sudden I'm not responsible for this, or I don't have to think about how this happens. It just, at some point in the future, if I were to step away from the business, that might feel different. But, as long as I'm still on the hook for growing the business, I still feel that sense of ownership for it. And so, for me, it's been gratifying to see our brand expand into new countries, into new stores, new restaurants. And each of those moments is like, oh, this is so exciting. This is what we had hoped for. And This was the kind of thing we used to worry about or daydream about back in the day.
So why do you suppose a company as large and powerful as Coke, why do they need to acquire companies like Honest Tea? Just looking at it from a 50,000 foot level, I'm sure the Honest Tea sales, as great as they are for you, they're a minuscule drop in the bucket for Coke. So clearly these companies have not been successful at introducing their own alternative beverage brands. They could have created an Honest Tea of their own. Maybe they tried, maybe it failed. But even today, 20 years later, they don't seem to be able to replicate the cult-like followings you have with these upstart brands. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, consumers are changing, and they are looking for different options, and they're looking for different connections. And so the big companies are very good at what they do. As the marketplace starts to fragment, the big companies don't have necessarily the ear or the insight into these new marketplaces and these new consumers. And so as they see the sales of some of their core products start to decline, they identify other brands that are growing, that are resonating with consumers, especially the consumers they're missing. And of course, when you look at outlets or channels like the natural foods channel, which are growing quickly, continue to grow, or retailers like Whole Foods, which are, gaining more margin and some of the higher margin products and customers, then these big companies, if they see a brand that's gaining traction there, they've tried over the years, as you know, to make these products and have not succeeded. So when they find someone who's cracked the code, that's a very valuable asset. And so they have sought out, obviously companies like Honest Tea and others to be their partners there. And from our point of view, we always love that natural foods channel. That's like the bedrock of our business. But if these big companies can help us expand into new markets where we don't have a presence, that for us is a great incremental opportunity. And so it can be a synergistic relationship. It's not always, but at least for us, it has been.
It sounds like it has been. But, one can make the argument that the minute that acquisition or even the investment happened, consumers would say, wait a minute. I mean, you're Honest Tea, obviously, soda and the history of that industry versus all the socially responsible, clean, free of artificial ingredients and GMOs and all these things. It's a very different world, but it doesn't sound like it's had any negative effect at all.
Look, there was some concern raised certainly at the time of Coke's investment. And I said at the time, all right, I understand that concern. And as soon as you see us compromising our mission in any way, if we start making our products less organic or less fair trade or more sweet, more calories, let us know. And the fact is, we just haven't. We've increased and expanded our commitment to organics across our whole line, as well as with fair trade now. Just when Coke first invested, 40% of our teas had fair trade tea in them. By 2011, all of our teas had fair trade tea. And just last year, we converted our supply chain over to fair trade sugar. So we're deepening those commitment areas. And so when you can do that, you have a much better chance, not a guarantee, but a much better chance of staying connected and relevant to your consumers and your core channels. And so it feels like we have, lived up and upheld the brand name that we started 19 years ago.
So when you think about the ingredients of success in a new venture, part of it's obviously talent. There's hard work, there's planning, and then there's, as you alluded to, some degree of serendipity along the way. If you had to sort of take a look back in the rearview mirror and say how much of each of those contributed, what do you think it would be?
Yeah, certainly the differentiated product, I'd say, 33% differentiated product, right? That such a clear, different proposition. 30% passion and perseverance on the part of the entrepreneurial team and sort of making the right decisions and the right commitments. And obviously, a good high performing group of people. And then that last third is getting the right brand, the right package, the right way to deliver the idea to market. And so when you get all, sort of a third of each of those combined with, the right timing, but we didn't, I wouldn't give us too much credit for timing because we started way ahead of where people were. And so we're just kind of now at the point where this is right where consumers are. So I think that those are the right formula for success.
Let's go back in time. Let's say it doesn't work out. the market doesn't take off, the competition eats your lunch, you run out of money, whatever it is. You said yourself you almost went under several times.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have tried another startup, or was this like a one-time deal for you?
Well, I don't think of myself as a chronic entrepreneur. So I think I would have done some other startup, but it wouldn't have been another food one. I might have, my background before going to business school had been in national service. I had helped create the AmeriCorps demonstration program that led to its passage of AmeriCorps. I was involved in government, had worked on Capitol Hill. So I could see myself getting maybe involved in some kind of political or nonprofit startup. I have just recently become involved as executive chairman of a new startup called Beyond Meat, which is a plant-based protein company. So very different from Honest Tea, but it's something I'm also very passionate about and very engaged in. So for me, I think about, rather than think about what is the business I want to be involved in, I think about what are the issues that I care about and what are the best ways to address them.
If you were starting up a new company today, and let's say specifically in the food and beverage space,
yeah,
what would it be? Where do you see the white space?
No question. It's this Beyond Meat. We have launched the first plant-based burger to be carried in the meat section at grocery stores around the country. And this is a product that if you were trying to sell to vegetarians, you sell your product in the freezer section where vegetarians buy their veggie burgers. But if you want to gain credibility with the flexitarians or with the omnivores or carnivores, you need a product that looks and tastes and cooks like a hamburger. And that's what we've done with this product, the Beyond Burger. And it has been so fun and exciting to see how consumers have gravitated toward it. But it's equally exciting to look at the environmental and health impact of this product in contrast to the analog, of course, being the hamburger. And so to see the pace of adoption and the velocity in the stores of this product is it's actually a little mind-blowing. I almost feel, here we were building Honest Tea over 20 years, and to see this Beyond Burger take off so quickly, it's a partially a different moment in time, a different type of product breakthrough, but going back, it's still that same thing. It's a dramatically different product, so that's the differentiated product, a strong management team, and then a well-designed brand and solution to the need.
As a category, do you think it's mostly giving a better product to vegetarians, or is it actually converting omnivores over to the category?
It's converting. It really is. If we were only selling to the vegetarians, we'd be selling to 5% of the audience. And just as with Honest Tea, we never said to the store, we want to go have this product carried in the organic aisle. We always said, we want to be in the beverage aisle. We want to be reaching everybody who walks down that beverage aisle and have an organic proposition within that context. And the same with Beyond Meat. We want to be in the meat section. We want to redefine the meat section from being just a place where people buy chicken breast and hamburger to thinking about buying chicken protein, cow protein, and plant protein, and they're all part of the same continuum.
And what's your role in the company?
I'm the executive chairman, so it's a half-time role, but I'm very closely involved with the strategy of the company, the financing of it, the growth, and thinking about how we continue to drive and expand.
Do you think you have another startup in you? Could you ever go back from scratch and do this all over again? Or are you done with that world?
I'm not. I love that part. I love that stage. I'm always happy to advise companies. I'm so engaged right now with Honest Tea and Beyond Meat. This feels like a great role for me. It's not that I'm afraid of a startup or that I don't have that desire. It's hard for me to think of two companies that have higher opportunity to make an impact on diet and health and environment than these two. So I don't, as long as I'm, engaged in what I believe in and can work and have an impact on it, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Knowing everything you know today, you jump in that time machine, go back to the mid-90s, and now you have a chance to give the newly minted MBA, Seth Goldman, some advice. What do you think it would be?
Obviously, make sure, if you can, boil down exactly what you're building. Where's the value of what you're building? And if you had asked me in 1999, I would have said, I'm building this tea company. And that would have been the wrong answer. The real answer is you're building this brand, this honest brand that will stand for authenticity and, integrity and transparency. That points to a different set of actions than if you think you own a tea company. So that's certainly an important piece of advice. But other than that, I would say make sure advice that I actually did follow, make sure you keep a balance between your family life and your personal life and your work life.
Do you feel you were able to do that when you were building the company?
Absolutely, yeah. I've been very fortunate to have a wonderful family who's very close with both, my immediate family as well as my larger family. Don't make those short-term sacrifices. They're not worth it. Think about it as a marathon, not a sprint. Yes, it's intense work and demanding work, but, you want to be around doing this for 10, maybe 20 years, not, 2 or 3 years. Don't worry about trying to flip this thing.
The name of my podcast is The Art of Excellence. I'm still learning what excellence means to me. What does it mean to you?
Excellence for me really means that you have a vision and you're able to execute along that vision without compromise. So you have clarity of vision. You have people who are aligned with that vision and who understand what it takes to pursue that vision, and that you have the right resources to pursue that vision, meaning whether either through fundraising or through partnerships, you've identified what it takes to make that vision come to life and to do it without compromise.
I like that. It's a good answer.
Thank you.
Seth, I can't thank you enough. This has been really educational and fun for me, and I'm hopefully for the audience as well. I really appreciate your time.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. I enjoyed it.
Hey, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. You can subscribe to the show at iTunes, Stitcher, and theartofexcellence.com. I've got one small favor to ask. If you like the show, please take a minute and leave us a review on iTunes. I would really appreciate that. I'll see you next time.